Good evening and welcome to the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series 10-year anniversary. I am Paul Citizen Stark, the chaplain at Heidelberg University in Tiffin, Ohio, which is the native land of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, Maiamia, and Wyandot nations. In my second year at Heidelberg, I was a part of the first talk on campus by Mr. Jimmy Lichtman and Mr. Don Behm, as they told their stories of a survivor and a liberator of the Mauthausen concentration camp at the close of World War II. Wow, what an event I will never forget. And it turned into much more as we continue to remember the Holocaust and other genocides through the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series. The grandson of Mr. Lichtman, Mr. David Fox Estrin, the founder of Together We Remember, is here tonight to help us in celebrating the last 10 years. David is a gifted leader and speaker, and it is an honor to work with him in this endeavor. David?
Thank you so much, Paul. Thank you to the Heidelberg community. Hello, everyone. My name is David Fox Estrin. I lead Together We Remember, which is an emerging movement to empower the next generation of leaders to end identity-based violence all over the world by turning collective memory into collective action. I am coming to you today from the land of the Pawtucket and Massachusetts, otherwise known as Boston, Massachusetts. I have a swirl of incredible emotions as we start today's program, because it was just 2 weeks after my grandpa, Jimmy Lichtman, passed away that we hosted our very first Together We Remember vigil on Duke University's campus. And I reached out to communities around the country, and there was one that immediately said yes to co-host a vigil and host a 24-hour name reading to honor victims of genocide in solidarity with me and my friends at Duke, and it was Heidelberg University. And Together We Remember would not be where it is today if not for the solidarity and friendship of our friends at Heidelberg University. So thank you everyone for joining, and for all those who are joining from around the world, welcome. I truly believe that what Heidelberg University has been doing through the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series and in partnership with Together Remember over the last 10 years is on the frontier of innovation in Holocaust genocide and human rights education. You have a small but mighty university in rural Ohio that is essentially functioning as a pop-up Holocaust museum and genocide education center for a few days of the year, which offers a lot of potential for those communities that don't have local access to a human rights center in their backyard. So pay attention to the history of this program, and I think you'll start to see what I mean by being on the frontier of innovation. I also want to acknowledge that we are coming together in the midst of a global pandemic. Just the other day, we passed 500,000, at least 500,000 lives lost here in the United States and many more around the world. And we wanted to channel the resilient spirits of Jimmy and Don, and despite the pandemic, still host this lecture series initiative and this program. And now we're able to reach as many students and educators and colleagues around the world as we would have, we're reaching tons of folks, as many folks as we've reached in the last decade in just perhaps 1 year and a couple of programs. Now, a couple of notes of housekeeping really quick. Number one, timing. We're going to do our best to stick to just over an hour, but we might run long into about an hour and a half. If you have to drop off, that's all good. Don't worry about it. We hope you can stick around for the course of the program. I do want to share a trigger warning. We will be talking about subject matter related to genocide and atrocities, so there will be moments with some heavy content. If you have questions, feel free to share them in the chat. Our colleagues are collecting them, and we will have a Q&A session at the end. And we are going to be sharing some videos throughout the program. Some folks couldn't join us live, so we will be sharing some videos. There might be a bit of a lag, but don't worry about it. Just join us with full intention, and we'll listen to the words of those who are beaming in virtually with us today. Now, to kick things off, what we wanted to do is also invite you to introduce yourselves by sharing where you're coming from with a land acknowledgement. So you heard Reverend Stark and myself share a land acknowledgement as we started the program. Carol should be dropping a link to native-land.ca where you can look up which Indigenous land you are calling home as of now. And you could say, hello, I am David from Boston, otherwise known as the land of blank, and that would be a wonderful way to get the conversation going in the chat. But now, I'd like to begin our program by invoking the memory of the two gentlemen who helped us, who inspired this entire initiative, Jimmy Lichtman, my grandfather, and Don Behm. Allow me to bring you back to the very first moments of when they were gathered on Heidelberg University's campus for the very first time. And you'll hear the national anthem being sung. The booming voice that you hear is the voice of Don Behm in the background. So I am going to switch up my screen share here, so just bear with me for a moment, and we will go ahead and join Don and Jimmy in that first ever experience.
Oh, say can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight's last gleaming, whose broad stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rockets there, the ones were singing in air, gave through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave?
I want to tell you something. I'm 85 years old. Many things had happened to me. If somebody would have told me that someday I'll live long enough to live that long to meet my liberators, and not only one, 2, 3, or 4 of them, this is something unbelievable. It's unbelievable that I'm sitting in here with my liberators next to me. And for the first 30 years after I was a liberator, I had not said a word to my wife or to my immediate family. After 30 years, one night, I couldn't sleep, and I decided that what I'm doing now is wrong, because if I die tomorrow, no one would know that. And I decided that I'm going to go and start to talk and to tell my children, my wife, my children, and my grandchildren, and from my family, and all over wherever I could go. And I'm very happy that I had the strength to do it. It's not easy. I'm telling you right now, it is hell of hell, but I'm going to tell you. After for a couple of days, we were back in a cattle wagon, and the old 77 us, and we were sent to Austria, to the concentration camp Mauthausen, which was, mind you, the railroad station was right in the center of town. And then from there we had to walk up to the mountains, I'm saying this with the railroad station because the local people saw us going, everybody seen us, that we are going to this concentration camp. And the natives knew damn well what's going on. Going up to the mountains, some people couldn't walk anymore because they were tired, hungry. And the stormtrooper just took the pistol and bring. That was the introduction. And when I heard the people running to the main gate, all of a sudden I see a tank coming in, and this gentleman here on it, and my next his friend also became a very close friend of mine. They are entering my concentration camp, and immediately microphone that you are free and try to come and we will take care of you.
I would like to have you all travel with me back a few years to May the 5th, 1945. A glorious sunshiny day. I was riding as tank commander with the 11th Armored Division, B Troop, 41st Cavalry, mechanized. The Army had not warned us at all about what we were about to see. And so I pulled the tank down. I told the driver, pull it down, ease it in, don't smash the gate. And the gates swung open. And immediately a group of prisoners. Now, I've seen happy people at ball games when their team won, but never in my life have I seen anyone as happy as those guys were, because we literally had just saved their lives. They were just overwhelmed. They wanted to get out and kiss my tank, of all things. But it was a awakening experience. It was a new experience for me. It was a sight to behold. When we broke that gate open, the first thing I saw was a pile of dead bodies about 3 feet high, just cast in there like they had been piled away. And I walked through the camp and went back to the crematorium, saw the big room, the gas chamber, where they would strip the prisoners naked and pack them into the shower room and open the jets. And instead of water coming out of them, cyanide gas came out. And they killed them, and they drug them over, and there was a pile of dead bodies just about 6 feet from the oven, or from the big gas chamber. And the oven was there. It was still warm. The guards had all left. They heard us coming, and they got out of there, and justly so. Eventually, we found a good share of them, but I couldn't stay too long, but we had a war to continue. And when we realized that the war was over, we didn't celebrate. We all filed into the little church there and got down on our knees and thanked our Maker that we had made it through alive. Then we came out, and then we got drunk.
So now what I'd love to do is welcome Jim Meinhard from Heidelberg University to kind of help us understand the origin story about how this all came together with my grandpa and Don Behm. And then we'll hear from President Huntington, who will kind of pick it up and remind us what it was like that first time that we were there. And then we'll hear from Courtney, who will, via video, Courtney DeMeo, who will tell us about what has happened over the last few years, in the last decade, the different speakers that have joined us. So Jim, over to you. Please tell us how all of this came together.
Well, thank you, David, very much. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you all this evening. I was employed at Heidelberg as a major gift officer, and I've been with the university now for 13 years. Don Behm was one of the early alums that I had met upon my arrival. He graduated in the class in 1951, and he entered the Hall of Fame for his years of loyal dedication and service to many of the teams at Heidelberg for over a half century. In the late fall of 2009, Don had just finished shopping for groceries, which he did every week, and he stopped by the office to visit, and he showed me the snapshot picture that is before you. Two smiling men, Don's on the right and Jimmy's on the left, and that picture was taken at a recent military reunion. Don and his family had attended these military reunions over the years. As you know, he was a member of the U.S. Army, and in early May of 1945, they liberated Mauthausen. Don asked me if Heidelberg would be interested in inviting Jimmy Lichtman to share his story as a Holocaust survivor. My colleagues encouraged me to talk with Chaplain Paul Stark, who extended the invitation to Jimmy Lichtman. Now, this is amazing, but Don and Jimmy never met formally at the liberation of Mauthausen, but nearly 65 years later, at that U.S. reunion, they met, ignited a friendship, creating a legacy of grit, perseverance, and hope by sharing their stories for the first time at Heidelberg in March 2010. Thus, the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series was established. Tonight, may we never forget. At this time, it's my pleasure to introduce the 14th president of Heidelberg University, Rob Huntington, who has been a strong supporter and advocate of this series since its inception. Rob, thank you for sharing your personal perspective and memories of that initial program with Don and Jimmy, and what impact has the series had on Heidelberg University?
Rob, you're on mute. We've got our first Zoom muter.
All right. Let me just say I have to unmute myself to be heard. Although that may, there are people probably who would like to mute me more often. What I was going to say was happy birthday. Today's Jim Meinhard's birthday, and his timing couldn't be more perfect on a night that we're celebrating the memories of Jimmy and Don, and why we remember the Holocaust and never forget. This is a privilege for me. Thank you very much, David and the committee, for inviting me to participate. I'm speaking from University Hall here on the Heidelberg University campus, but on the indigenous lands of the Peoria, Kaskaskia, the Miami, and the Wyandot nations, and it's a privilege to be here. We are remembering March 24th, 2010. That event was called Remembering the Holocaust, Intersections with Heidelberg. Let me begin with a comment about the setting. The Wickham Great Hall, and many people on this gathering tonight know what about the Wickham Great Hall. So let me paint a picture for you. It's a rectangle. When you walk in, it's long in front of you. The stage was to your left. And we filled up the room with chairs. And the seating capacity in the Wickham Great Hall by the fire code is posted 224 inhabitants. And starting about 15 minutes before the event kicked off, Paul Stark, Jim Meinhard, and I were beginning to get a little nervous. It filled up, and it filled up, and it kept filling up. And before long, there were people standing behind and around the edges of the windows and by the chairs. And then there were more students showing up and some community guests that began to sit at the feet of the people standing behind the chairs. And then people came in and sat at the feet of the people in the front chairs between the stage, again, stage to the left when you first enter. And it just kept coming and coming. By the time the event started, the entire entrance was filled with people. Our best estimates, my recollection, 300 plus. There could have been 325 people in that room. I'm assuming the statute of limitations has run out on the violation of the fire code 11 years later. Also in attendance that night, and she's with us again tonight, Dr. Susan Mccafferty, my wife, and our two children, Ashley, who was 12, and Aiden, who was 9. Both of them sat on the floor between us in chairs and the stage. That evening was about 2 men, 2 lives, and really one story that came together there in May 1945 and then got reunited about 65 years later, as Jim said. And in that one story, we had the chance to meet Jimmy Lichtman. And with Jimmy Lichtman, you meet Martha Lichtman, and the love of his life, and he's the love of her life. And through Martha and Jimmy, we ended up meeting their daughter, Kathy, and husband, Irv, and then daughter, Lisa, who's here tonight, and son, David, and each of them have families that are starting to grow as well. And through Don, of course, graduate, many people, although I didn't, because I had started the previous fall, my presidency, so I was meeting Don for the first time, and also Jean, his wife, who graduated in 1952 for the first time. And through them, eventually, we meet Scott, we meet Stephen, we meet Stuart, although I had met Stuart because his kids went to the same schools our kids went to, and daughter Susie. And all of them got more engaged in this over time. There were many special moments that were shared that night in that busting at the seams crowd in the Wickham Great Hall. Moments of awe and respect for Don, the liberator, who at every point of people trying to give him recognition, acknowledgement, and thanks, deflected it and denied that he'd done anything special. I just want to keep my head down and not get shot. I want to do my job. And there were moments of affection and tears for Jimmy, the survivor, who went in graphic detail, sharing many stories, sometimes sitting, sometimes standing. There were moments of total silence in the Wickham Great Hall that night. Imagine that, 325 people silence, listening to Don speak and especially Jimmy speak. And there were moments of rousing applause and really boisterous recognition for who they are, who they were in our moments. And through that all, through the entire event, all of us were pulled together. We didn't appreciate it as greatly then as we do now. And I'm going to say something about that in a moment. It was also a special evening for me because about 20 minutes before we entered the Great Hall, in meeting Jimmy for the first time, I asked him how he was feeling. He said, well, I'm really pleased to be here. However, it's my anniversary tonight and I'm missing that on that particular visit because they'd gotten married in 1953 on March 24th. And so it was their 57th wedding anniversary that evening. And he shared that with me. And so half an hour later or so, as I was asked to greet everybody, and I mentioned that, I said, well, this is a special night because it's also the wedding anniversary of Susan and me. It was our 20th wedding anniversary. We also got married on March 24th. To the day he passed, he never forgot that. And he mentioned it several times. It was also special because at the end, a lot of people, students and adults alike, including me, got in a line to get our program signed. And to this day, I still have the program of the event, which included paragraph descriptions of Don and Jimmy, and at the bottom, both of them had signed it, and I've kept it. And what made it a treasure was I didn't realize that Jimmy had given me 2 programs, and I didn't realize what the second program was until I got home that night. Same program, but on the back, he wrote, I love you, Jimmy. And I bet he shared that feeling with a lot of people because through all the horrors that Jimmy Lichtman went through, he always came back to love. And when he was asked about forgiveness, he said, I can forgive, I can't forget, but I will always love. And that was compelling. And so their voices were defining that night. To my recollection, Don said in so many words, but I think approximately this, we knew what we were fighting for the moment our tanks burst through the gates because we saw what had been done. But I'm not a hero. I was doing my job. I was fulfilling my duty. And Jimmy, when he shared in graphic detail how his father died, reiterating that expression, it was hell of hell, but then saying, I watched them beat the guards, beat my father to death with wooden sticks and clubs as he reached out to try to hand me my last crumb of bread, his last crumb of bread to me. And I remember Jimmy standing up, holding his hand out as if he were still grasping that last crumb of bread, tears pouring down his face. If you asked me whether I knew whether anyone else was crying, I couldn't because I couldn't see at that point. That's how I felt. And tears are pouring down my face. It's a moment where you just cannot let that moment go. It was that powerful. And so for me, Don Behm, his voice, a man of duty, a man of courage, and a man of humility beyond belief. And Jimmy Lichtman, a man of compassion, a man of reverence. He revered the United States. He came over here a couple years after the war in 47, became a citizen, built his life through New Jersey and Florida. He thought of the United States as God's gift to earth. And he revered his friends and his family. And then finally, love. They only made one other visit together here on our campus. Don, obviously, thousands of times. A year and a half later, they came in the fall of 2011 in September. That program, because the Lichtman Behm Genocide lecture series had still not been created formally, was called Survivors and Liberators Reunited. Heidelberg Remembers the Holocaust. And they had a couple of other guests with them, another survivor, another liberator. You'll hear about that in a moment. We learned from our lesson. We moved to Cyberlane Gym, greater capacity, not running the risk of bad luck. And so we filled up Cyberlane Gym with an event on Monday night. And then Tuesday, we invited high school and middle school students in. And I was asked to greet the middle schoolers and the high schoolers. Imagine our gym filled with now children. And I walked up on stage to say hi to Jimmy and to say hi to Don, to meet Emery and George for the first time. And Jimmy greets me, shakes my hand, puts his arm around. So is your family here again? I said, no, but our daughter is. She's now 13 and a half, and she's actually down in the audience. He goes, let's go. We walk off the stage. We walk down. We walk to the aisle. He says, where is she? I say, Ashley. He pulls her out. I don't remember whether he shook her hand or hugged her. But I do remember this. At the end of that day, when they were done, Jimmy and Martha and I think Lisa might have been with them that time, but other members of the group who were with them at their car in the parking lot outside this building, Jimmy Lichtman hugged me and he kissed me. I didn't know that I would never see him again. I spoke with him several times, traded cards, but I did not know he would be passing within 6 months. But I'll never forget the kiss. Less than 6 months later, on March 1st, when he died, we did something that we rarely do for people who are not alums, students, trustees, former employees. In other words, already part of the Heidelberg family. We announced Jimmy Lichtman's passing on March 2nd. He died the day before on March 1st, 2012, because he had become part of family. He was already part of the Heidelberg family. And 3.5 years later, when Don Behm passed away on August 14th, he was 89, Jimmy was about 87. We shared the same announcement about Don, connecting them both together one more time formally to the whole campus. So I'll close by saying this. Jim Meinhard had asked me, what do I think that event was about? I think it was a blessing. On that night, March 24th, 2010, in the Wickham Great Hall here on this Heidelberg campus, over 300 students, faculty, staff, alumni, friends from the town, special guests, and children were given the sacred gift of glorious faith, profound hope, and a stronger force of all of humanity against the many faces and the ways of evil, the ways of hatred, racism, murder, and genocide that many people bring on many other people, and it knows no bounds and no limits. But on that night, then, now, and tomorrow, we had that gift because Heidelberg University was blessed, and we were blessed profoundly and forever by the compassion, the reverence, and the love of Jimmy Lichtman, and by the duty and the courage and the humility of Don Behm. And I was lucky to be there. And I'm grateful to share those thoughts with you tonight. Thank you. And so with that, I'm going to pass it over to Dr. Courtney DeMeo Puno, Associate Professor of History. She's also the Executive Director of our Owen Center for Teaching and Learning. She joined our Heidelberg faculty 6 months after that event in the fall of 2010. She can't be with us tonight. David already mentioned that. So she's going to offer up a video. This is what you should know. Everything that Courtney DeMeo Puno does is outstanding. And this video is as well. Courtney?
My name is Courtney DeMeo Puno. I am an associate professor of history here at Heidelberg University, and I'm the executive director of the Owen Center for Teaching and Learning. For the last 10 years, I've been really privileged to be a part of the Lichtman Behm Genocide lecture series. And though I joined the Heidelberg faculty about a year after the initial event that brought Jimmy and Don to our campus to speak to our students, David and Paul asked me to give sort of a historical retrospective on the program. And so I'd like to give you just a brief overview of where we've been over the last 10 years. So in 2011, we revisited the Holocaust, bringing Jimmy and Don back to campus again. Their first series was so well received that we felt like it was a really important message to send to our students to bring them back. And they were joined by George Sherman and Emery Grossinger. So we had 2 Holocaust survivors and 2 liberators of concentration camps come to campus and talk about their experiences. And so that was our sort of 2011 event. In 2012, we moved forward to the 1970s and explored the Cambodian Genocide, which occurred in the early 70s under Pol Pot and the Khmer Rouge. This was an incredibly important moment in the series for me personally, because this is an area that I often teach in some of my classes, and every time I teach the Cambodian Genocide to my students, they tell me that this is something that they had never learned about, and they ask questions about, like, why didn't we know this? Why weren't we taught about this in high school? And so the privilege of bringing Streng Kim-Che to campus to talk about her experiences was really important to me as an educator. In 2013, our featured speakers were Anna Rosmus and Emery Grosinger, and we were so thrilled to have Emery back on campus again. He was such a delight to be able to work with. And Anna Rosmus, I think her talk was really important because she sits at sort of the intersection between journalism and historian. And what she did that was so powerful was she did some investigative work and uncovered that her home community of Passau, which had sort of built its community myth around the idea of them being resistors of the Nazis and them helping to resist the Holocaust, were actually active collaborators and complicit in many of the atrocities that took place. And so her talk really touched on the intersection between the memories that we construct and the historical evidence and reality of what it is that actually happened in ways that I think many of our students hadn't really thought about. In 2014, we explored the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda, and our speaker was Claude Gatibuke. Claude was a fantastic speaker because he was able to personalize his experiences, and he really told them from the perspective that he had at the time, which was the perspective of a child. And so I think that really connected with our students in powerful ways that they weren't necessarily expecting. In 2015, our featured speaker was George Cronenberg, and from 2014 to 2015, we sort of carried through that theme of childhood in the event of atrocity or in the event of genocide. And so George Cronenberg's talk highlighted an under-recognized area of Holocaust research, which is an event known as the Kindertransport, where Jewish children from continental Europe were able to escape Nazi persecution by going and living with families in England. And so George was able to talk about his experiences, and that broadened our students' perspective on the Holocaust and got them to think about how the Holocaust was more than the camps. There were many other aspects of it that were important and worth recognizing. In 2016, our lecture series took a bit more of a local turn, and we focused on the Indigenous genocide, or the genocide of Indigenous peoples in the United States specifically. And our featured speaker was Chief Billy Friend of the Wyandot Nation. The Wyandot Nation is currently located in Oklahoma, but one of their historic homes was actually right up the road in Upper Sandusky. And so that brought sort of a local connection to the event and helped it really connect strongly with our students, so many of whom are from within about a 60-mile radius. In 2017, we revisited the Holocaust with Dr. Walter Ziffer and Martha Lichtman, and I remember this moment. This was a really special moment to me. I'm looking at Martha's picture right now, and I can't help but smile because she was so nervous before speaking to our students, and she just knocked it out of the park. I mean, she was so authentic and so vulnerable and so strong all at the same time. And I remember her saying to me beforehand, like, I'm not the speaker, Jimmy is the speaker. I don't usually do this, but she hit a home run, and our students just hung on every single word that she had to say. It was really a powerful moment. In 2018, we returned to the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda and revisited that, this time by partnering with the HYPE Career Ready program, so that our keynote speaker actually gave a keynote lecture to a combined audience of the entirety of the Heidelberg community. So approximately 1,000 people were in Cyberling Gymnasium to listen to her speak about her experiences during the Rwandan genocide, and there wasn't a dry eye in the room. I mean, it was a really incredible, really powerful discussion. And then finally, in 2019, David Estrin took the center stage and was our keynote speaker, talking about the Holocaust and global atrocity prevention. And I think one of the things that was really powerful and important about David's talk was that David was able to connect sort of his own identity and his calling in life to the sort of generational trauma and being the descendant of Holocaust survivors. And so for our students to really learn about how the experiences of his grandparents especially helped shape David's identity, his calling, and his mission in life, I think really gave our students a perspective on how, genocide is not something that it happens and then you get over it. It is something that you carry with you for the future and is something that carries on in future generations. And so I thought that that was a really powerful and important message for David to relay to our students, as well as, how to take action and how to prevent future global atrocities. I think that that call to action and that activism is an incredibly important piece and an area that we're looking to grow in the future. So that sort of gives you the last 10 years, give or take, of the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series. I have to say that it has been an absolute pleasure to be involved in this program. And although I missed sort of the opening event in 2010, I was thrilled and honored to be able to be a part of it for the last 10 years. And I'm really excited to see what directions the program will take in the future. And I hope that we will all be able to be together in Cyberling Gymnasium and Wickham Great Hall to be able to learn and grow and really think about our place in the world and how we as a community can all come together to help prevent global atrocities and genocide in the future. So thanks for listening. Have a good one.
A huge thank you to Jim, to Rob, to Courtney for helping set the stage and understand how we got to this moment and to understand the impact of the legacy of the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series over the past decade. Now what I'd love to do is welcome some family members of Don Behm and Jimmy Lichtman, including my own family. Behave yourselves, folks. But first, I want to welcome Leslie Halsteadbaym to join us and share, what has been the impact of this program on the Behm family and what has inspired you to support this work moving forward. Leslie, over to you. Thanks for joining us today.
And I remembered to mute. Thank you, David. I'm part of the cousins as opposed to the direct family. And the Behms had big reunions every fall, so we all knew each other, got to see each other, and Don was very much a major part of those activities. And none of us really knew anything about World War II and his work in World War II or his duty. But then in 2012, I was doing estate planning and contacted Jim. And I was going to set up an endowment for a scholarship. So that was my first meeting. And then the next time I met with him, he brought Rob Huntington with him. And they were wondering whether or not I would be willing to split that and have a scholarship endowment and then an endowment so that the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series would be able to continue in perpetuity, which was great for me. I thought it was a wonderful idea. I unfortunately never got a chance to meet Jimmy. I did meet George Sherman and Ernst Grossinger. So I did meet some of them. And then of course, all of David's family. And to me, the Holocaust is something we have to remember. When I was in 8th grade history, for whatever reason, my history teacher showed us pictures of the Holocaust, even the ones that were most horrific. And it made a huge impact on me that it's like, we really can do this to each other. And my German teacher in high school was married to a survivor, one that was there long enough that he actually had a tattoo. Later on, not all of the prisoners had tattoos. So that was another introduction to me of the Holocaust and the horrific things we can do. And when I went to grad school in Cleveland after graduating from Heidelberg in 1976, I lived with a family who was Jewish in the Jewish community. And if you're in the Jewish community in Cleveland, at least at that time, not so much now probably, you could not escape the reminders because people who worked in the delis, who owned the delis, owned other stores, frequently had tattoos on their arms. And if you weren't sure what they were, that sort of left you wondering. And the family I lived with, fortunately, were willing to talk to me and let me know about that. So I set up the estate planning for the endowment to continue. And I'm hoping that as a result of that, the never again will become a reality sooner rather than later, and that all of us will take care of each other worldwide. Thank you, David.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you so much for all your contributions on the committee, making this program and so many others that we have organized possible. Now, what I'd love to do is welcome my beloved grandma, Martha Lichtman, to share a few words as well, a little bit of your story and your message for the future. So Mama, or Mamush as I like to call you, will come on off of mute and let's hear from you.
Okay. Hello, everyone. My name is Martha Lichtman, and many of you know me as Jimmy Lichtman's wife of 60 years. Like my husband, I survived Holocaust, but in a different way, which I will tell you about shortly. In addition to being a survivor, I am also a proud mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, and a friend to Heidelberg University community. On behalf of our entire family, I would like to thank the university and everyone involved in Lichtman Behm Genocide lecture series over the years. It has truly been of our highlights of my life, and I look forward to it every year. I would like to share a few things with you today, a bit of my story, found memories from the past decade of the program, and humble request of all of you for the future. I was just 12 years old when World War II and the Holocaust opened my life in 1944. In matter of months, my home city in Budapest became hell of hell. I faced my husband often used to describe his experience in concentration camp of Auschwitz and Mauthausen. We lost our family, business, home, and rights. I lost my childhood, education, friends, and many family members, including my father. My family endured the worst of humanity, but also survived because of best of humanity. A Swedish diplomat named Raoul Wallenberg used his influence and courage to prevent thousands of Jews in Budapest from boarding trains of Auschwitz, my family included. After the war, my family immigrated to United States, where I met Jimmy, and we built a beautiful life together, a unique version of American dream. Now, let me tell you about our trips to Ohio each year. Jimmy and I traveled the world, but there was nothing like the hospitality and friendship we received from Heidelberg community. This year especially, miss your welcoming hugs, our conversation over lunch and dinner, meeting with students, and of course, remembering about the early years of this program. Few things brought more joy to Jimmy than reuniting with his liberators like Don Behm and George Sherman, and speaking to thousands of students in Tiffin. You were there for me when Jimmy passed in 2012, and our family was there to honor Don in 2015. At the same time, I found solidarity and strength in the stories of other genocide survivors and experts who have participated in the lecture series. I also found the courage to share my story. You offered me comforting space to this, and for that I will always be grateful. Now I want to speak about the future and importance of Ohio. The members' initiative. Right now, our country is so divided in many minority communities are threatened by acts of hate and violence. After the Holocaust, we said, never forget, never again. But how can we take action to keep these promises? This program and all of you involved in it give me hope. Hopefully that I shared with you today will stick with you to the rest of your lives. You are part of the last generation that will have the opportunity to meet the Holocaust survivor like me. You will be able to tell your children and grandchildren someday that you met someone who survived. I wouldn't be around forever, so it'll be up to you to keep our memory alive. My story is now part of your story. All of the survivors who have shared their stories over the years from different genocides in history have put their trust in you. Our legacy is your hands, and what happens next will be up to you. Together, we remember.
Mamush, thank you so much for those incredible words and for joining us this evening. I love you more than anything in the world. I hope my wife didn't hear that. I love you too, Miriam. I love you as much. Now what I love to do is welcome my wonderful sister, Lisa, joining from Atlanta to share. I've never interviewed you before. If you could tell us a little bit about what it was like to be Jimmy's granddaughter and a third generation survivor. And what has this lecture series and program meant to you?
Definitely. Thanks, David. This is so weird. He's my baby brother. But he's doing such awesome work. I'm so proud of him. Well, anyways, hi, everybody. Thank you so much for having us. And I'm sorry if you hear any yelling. It's actually Jimmy's great-granddaughter, May, who's downstairs running around before bath time. So I am joining you tonight from Muskogee Creek Nation, also known as Atlanta, Georgia. I'm one of David's two older sisters and another one of Jimmy and Martha's proud grandchildren. Like David, my sister Lauren and I felt a massive gap left when our dear Papa, as we called him, left us in 2012, and we carry the burden of continuing to tell his story. Not only are we so grateful that our brother has dedicated his life's work to keep their memory alive, but there is enormous comfort in knowing that the Heidelberg and now the greater Ohio community through Ohio Remembers will help share the burden of never again. I remember Jimmy telling us about this incredible community out in Ohio. He would say, "My family in Tiffin, Ohio." And while it was after Papa passed away, I am so grateful that I had the opportunity to finally attend a Lichtman Behm Genocide lecture series in person a few years ago and meet my long lost Heidelberg family. And it was really one of the most moving experiences of my life. Growing up as a third generation descendant of 4 Holocaust survivors, I admittedly had a very Holocaust-centric or Jewish-centric view of genocide and mass atrocities. For some reason, I had never learned about, or at least in detail about other events like the Holocaust. And this is why the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series is so important. It's really bringing attention to and sharing the stories of other genocides, as Courtney outlined earlier. I actually visited Cambodia in 2012 specifically to learn more about the events that happened there, which was remarkable to me that it happened in my lifetime, well, shortly before my lifetime, before I was born, and then also the events of Rwanda happening in my lifetime. To me, as a grandchild of Holocaust survivors, that really just blew my mind that it was still happening. And I couldn't believe it took 35 years of my life to truly learn and hear about what happened. There are so many stories to share and so many voices to lift up. And now, facing the challenges of 2020, we have also learned how important it is to listen to and lift up the voices of our fellow Americans and our own neighbors and our own communities. So also, I wanted to share a little bit that just for me personally, seeing the events of January 6th unfold were particularly traumatic and impactful to me. I know to everybody in different ways. Maybe it was because I know that after thinking about it and maybe a little bit of therapy afterwards, I wondered if maybe it was because I knew that if Papa were around to see what had happened that day, he would have been devastated to see Americans so divided. I'm actually glad that he didn't live to see what happened that day. We have a lot of healing and listening to do. Sorry, I'm getting a little emotional about that. Anyways, to wrap it up before I go overboard, I have hope because I really believe that because of our friends and family at Heidelberg and the other brave survivors who join the series every year. And of course, David, you doing all this amazing work. I have hope that, that good things lie ahead and that we can actually make a difference. So thank you to everybody for being here, for listening, and take it away, David.
Thank you, Lisa. It was so special to hear you share. And you set us up beautifully for our next speakers, who will really shine a light on other genocides in history and have been able to represent their community's experiences in a way that lets us say that never again means not just, it doesn't apply to just one community, but it applies to multiple communities, everyone impacted by identity-based violence, right? When we say together we remember, we're all about broadening that we the survivors, we their family members, we their allies. And so now I'm honored to welcome Shreng Kim Che to join us and to share a little bit of her story and why it was so important for her to share her experience at Heidelberg University so, a number of years ago. And then also after that, we will welcome Chief Billy Friend of the Wyandotte Nation to share his story as well. So Kim, over to you.
Okay. Good evening. I'm honored to be back with the Heidelberg's family to share my story. Sorry about the light. I didn't know how bad the lighting on the wall is. It's so dark. Again, like David said, I am a survivor of the killing fields. I was 5 years old when the country when they took over the country, the Pol Pot group. And I remember my father grabbed all his children and run to the back door when the tank coming in front of our house. And it was so chaotic. And as a child, I didn't know what was going on until they gather all of us into the jungle. And I don't know how many of you are familiar with the jungle in Cambodia, in Southeast Asia. It's the most nightmare for our family. And we were from the city. They took everyone out of the city in a matter of 2 hours. It's like a ghost town. We were in the jungle like by 10 o'clock at night or so. It was dark, and what we have on us, that's what we have. And they gathered the family together, and then the Pol Pot leader at that time selecting, dividing family to concentrate camp. I was about 5.5. They start dividing, and before they divide, they ask who's an educator, who's an engineer, doctor, lawyers, stand up. Those are the first that they take away from the group, and they took them to execute. My father was smart enough to recognize a sign right away, and he didn't stand up with them among the people. He even hid his glasses. He hardly can see without his glasses. I remember he kept telling my older brother and sister, we are pretty much farmer. We're not city people, and we don't know anything. We don't know how to read and all that. So then they start dividing, husband separate from wife and children. I was old enough for the children camp, so they put me in the children camp. And through my mom have a total of 10 children, only 4 survived. 6 others got executed. I saw my brothers and sister got killed in front of me. And the last one I saw was my father. They walked through the camp where I was. I can't even look at him because I don't want them to know that I'm related to him. Because the minute they saw that I'm related to him, they will finish me as well. Day in, day out for 3 years and 8 months, all I saw was the killing fields, and I thought that was the way of life until I escaped until the 1979. That's when my mother was really fortunate. She has some friend who lead me from the camp and told me that she knows where my mother is. So I ran with her, and she's able to match me up with my mother at the time. And then we would continue escaping. And in 79, that's when the Vietnamese invaded, and we were just trying to get out of the jungle and try to get into the city. My mother remembered my father's telling her that if anything happened and we're still living, we must go back to our old house, meaning the city house that where we were from, Battambang, which is the second big city other than the capital. So for me, I thought, seeing the killing field day in, day out, that was a normal day life. I didn't know any different. So until I got through the jungle and come to the border of Thailand where the refugees are. And that's when we bumped to the missionary, the Red Cross, the UN was all there to help us. But before I get to that, if you have any question, you're welcome to ask me. But through the escape, I helped my mother deliver my youngest sister. Imagine being 8.5, doing that. I was like, in my mind, it's like, excuse my language, I was like, no way in hell am I gonna be a mother. It's awful, because, and we joke around in order to survive what we have left. So I often nowadays, both my sister that I deliver, I often check her head and go, oh, it's still intact, because I pull it very hard and you're still living. And we make joke things like that in a way to just show each other, how far we have come. So 4 children, 2 boys and 2 girls made it to US with my mother. But my father was done. My grandparents, both sides, was executed. My 2 older brothers and 2 older sisters that I have witnessed throughout the children's camp because they want to demonstrate the killing. So they took them. And the reason I know that was my brother and sister, because they usually don't disclose anything. They let other children to see it so we can be horrified by what they are demonstrating. So after the 1979, we got to Thailand camp, and that's when I saw people actually helping each other, saving others. And through that journey, if I miss the step through the jungle, I can step on landmine. There's landmine everywhere. So we have to be careful to walk through the people ahead of us who know the direction. And this is no map, no Google, no GPS. We just going through the jungle. And we don't have shoe or anything. So we got to the camp, and where they gave us some, the shoes and food and all that we stationed there about a year before they tested us. And we got sponsored through my uncle who came to the state before the war. And he was out there to search for us in the refugee camp. So he contacted the organization through the Catholic organization to find us. So they helped him and his wife's side to sponsor us. And we finally made it on the plane. That's when we can smile and say we did it. And we count our blessing. We count our blessing every day. What scares me is 9/11. And what scares me the other day was the Capitol. I said, this is not America. This is what I expect in Cambodia, not in America. So it's really sad for me to see that's happening in American soil and American people. So I just hope that we continue this, and through education that we can do a job for the generation to come, so we don't have what we saw onto the Capitol. Because I was so upset. I was so upset because this is not the American dream that I dreamed to see. All I want to see is peace and, helping each other. And what I saw the other time in the Capitol, it just so heartening. That's what I expected to see in Cambodian. I went back to Cambodia and I saw S-21. Lisa, did you get to see the S-21? Yep. So it's very accurate what you saw there. As my childhood remind me for 3 years and 8 months. And that's what I see. And I thought that was the way of life until I arrived here and went to school and interact with other folks and with mentors, teachers who will help me through my learning. And guess what? I major in education, in higher education. It's always been my dream, helping other, because I've got help from teachers and friends and family. And it was a really honor for me to work at Heidelberg 10 years. And then I move on because my boy got bigger and we seek other opportunity for him. Now we're in Stowe, Ohio, and we are really blessed. I'm married to a nerd. He's an engineer and he is also Cambodian. And his father also died in the war. And again, got executed just like my father. And any question? Any of you have any question?
Kim, are you able to stick around with us and we can do questions at the end of the program?
Sure.
Awesome. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you so much for sharing your powerful story. I think this is a testament to why it's so important that we hear each other, those of us that have personal connections to instances of identity-based violence throughout history. Mm-hmm. I remember when we were preparing for this program, you told me about, how your family interacts with each other. And my sister and I often joke about how families of survivors and, immigrants, we all kind of have similar stuff going on. And it was really fun to chat. So thank you so much for sharing your story. I know we will be doing it again in the future together.
Sure will.
And to everyone, I know, as I mentioned at the beginning of this program, some of the subject matter would be and feel quite heavy. So I want to invite everyone, before we hear from Chief Friend, to just take a breath with me. It's really important that we care for ourselves as we hear these heavy stories. When I was growing up, we didn't really take many breaths in between these stories. We just kind of heard all of them, and it was a lot. So just join me. I'm going to take a quick breath here. Wonderful. Chief Billy Friend, over to you. Welcome you to share a little bit of your story and why it was important for you to share it with the Heidelberg community then and now.
Thank you, David. In my Wyandotte language, I'd like to say Koya Mataru, Hamendadura Izache, Wandak Kwaiche. And I simply say, hello, my friends. Hamendadura is who I am, and Wyandotte is who we are. And I just want to say that, first of all, it was such an honor to come and speak at the lecture series there at Heidelberg. And not only such an honor, but I was very humbling experience, and especially to know those who had spoken, who had been there before me. And it was one of the highlights of my tenure as being chief. I am the chief of the Wyandotte Nation, and of course, we are located today in Northeast Oklahoma. I've been the chief of the tribe since 2011. I've actually served the tribe for the last 23 years in different capacities. And when I came and had the opportunity to share and talk about the genocide that took place not only with my tribe, with the Wyandottes, but with all Native people that took place, and the tragedy that it was. And one of the things that really for me myself is I started my own personal what I call journey of understanding, learning who I was as an Indigenous person and as a Native person. And I've been again to go back and research my family history, and I shared a little bit, I know, that night with of my family and where we came from, and my Native roots going back to Michigan there. And really one of the things that we really talk about a lot is, and the physical genocide, of course, was a horrendous event that took place over a lot of years with Indigenous people. But for our tribe and for my generation, it was the cultural genocide, and the cultural genocide that all of a sudden we have a generation of Wyandottes who wake up and we don't know what it is to be Wyandotte. We don't know what our history was. Our culture was gone, our traditions, our language was all but gone. Nobody spoke the language. Very few people were telling the stories and all the things that are very important to Native people. And going back and beginning to find out why that was, what happened, in one generation or two generations, how did that take place? And, of course, where I'm sitting today is the site of one of the former U.S. government boarding schools. It was the Seneca Indian boarding school. And of course, where the mantra of those boarding schools, they put over the door, kill the Indian, save the man. And, and that's what it was about, to bring the kids in, take them out of their parents' home, cut their hair, forbid them to speak their language, forbid them to sing their songs and to do their dances. And so, that took place prior to my generation. And, waking up, when I was born in 1963, and it wasn't spoken of. My parents were told that by their parents, when if somebody asks you if you're Indian, you don't tell them that you were, because of the stigma and the discrimination that took place against Native people. Most people don't realize that Native Americans could not even become U.S. citizens until the Indian Citizenship Act was passed in 1924. And so, it was, looking back and taking that journey myself and learning what my people went through. We like to say the story of the Wyandotte is one of adaptation, perseverance. No matter where we found ourselves, whether we were in Michigan or Ohio or in Canada, our people always learned to adapt to where they were at, and they learned to persevere in spite of the odds that were against them. We were the very last tribe to leave Ohio. Our people stayed longer than any other. There's 54 tribes at one time that called Ohio home. And I would like to say that since I was at Heidelberg, I was the first tribal leader now to be elected to the Board of Trustees for the Ohio History Connection. And I now sit on the Ohio History Connection, and that's a great step. I mean, you talk about restorative justice, and the board there realizing that with the great history, the great Native American history there in Ohio, to have representation on that board, it was just an honor, for me to sit on that board and continue to sit on that board. I always like to say one of the really defining moments as a tribal leader for me, and I was in a meeting, and a little elderly Native woman came up, and we were talking, and she made a statement to me that I'll never forget, and I think about it every day. And she said, "Chief, it's okay to look back. It's just not okay to stare." And that brought a lot of meaning, saying that it's okay to look back and see what happened and learn from that. But if we stare, then we become bitter and we become angry, and we become sometimes revengeful. And and today, we left Ohio in 1843. There were 663 of our tribal people that boarded steamships in Cincinnati, Ohio, made their way to what today is Wyandotte County, Kansas, and Kansas City. We were there until 1867. 1867, there were 300 Wyandotte people left that made that journey from there to present day where we're at today, what was then Indian Territory, but today is Oklahoma. Today, we have 6,572 tribal citizens. Today, we're teaching the language to our children. Our Culture and Museum Center has, today, they were actually in the school, in the local school, teaching how to do wampum belts, and the activities that are taking place. We've built over 50 houses for our tribal elders that now can live in this community and share those experiences with our kids. And so, it's like I said, we look back, we learn from what happened. It wasn't a pretty picture, but the thing that we learned, that our people always figured out a way to persevere. And today we continue to persevere. We continue to move forward. And I just want to say Tijame, that is thank you, and Wyandotte for the opportunity to be a part of. I'll always feel connection to Heidelberg. Jim and Carol Meinhard, I've spent a lot of years going up to the Carol's junior high class and teaching the history of the Wyandottes in Upper Sandusky, Ohio. And I just have a great connection to Ohio and to Heidelberg University. And just thank you for including me tonight in this. As I said, it's an honor, and it's just great to see everyone once again. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Chief Friend, for joining us and helping us shine a light on the legacy of genocide in this land here in the United States of America. I know my grandfather referred to this as the greatest country in the world, and I grew up with that essence of American exceptionalism, and it's been really hard to reconcile that with my more recent understanding of history. And I really, to me, similar to the phrase "never again," saying that America is the greatest country in the world is a hope, it's a wish, it's a dream, it's an opportunity if we're able to work together across lines of difference. And so I'm just so grateful that we had the opportunity to hear a little bit about your story, your people. And of course, I also want to welcome Jim Meinhard back for a second. Jim, are you still with us?
I am here, David.
Jim, I would love for you to share just a little bit about what has emerged since Chief Friend came to Heidelberg, and some ways that you are working towards restorative justice with the Wyandotte Nation.
Well, we were able to accomplish a feat that went on over for 175 years. So let me take you back to 1824 when the Wyandotte Mission Church was built. And it was built primarily for the Wyandottes. And they also had a burial ground around the church. And at the time, Billy spoke to the Trail of Tears in 1843. The church fell into disrepair. It was restored in 1889 by John Stewart United Methodist Church. And over the years, the church has been open for worship service during the summer months, and with a variety of pastors preaching on Sunday morning. And it was 2019 when Billy returned with a couple bus loads of Wyandottes, and that Saturday afternoon, the church was physically given back to the Wyandottes. They hold the deed now to that property, and it took 175 plus years for that to happen, but it was a very special day. The church was packed, and Billy said, he said, this one occasion in which they, meaning the Wyandottes, did not have to go begging for the property. Now, there's another story behind that, but the property was owned by the Global Ministries of the United Methodist Church, and it has been returned back to the Wyandottes. And together with the Wyandottes, we are maintaining the property, but that property is now theirs. And there was also another burial ground near Harrison Smith Park. So it was a special day, and I remember talking to Billy after the service, and I told him I had to split because they had to work at Heidelberg that afternoon with a football game. So a special story, and it was really a neat day, a meaningful day, filled with a lot of tears of joy. So thanks again, Billy.
Thanks, Jim, for sharing that story. And I think it's really important to talk about not just all of the tragedy that has that has taken place in the past, but how we are restoring and working towards a more peaceful and unified future. And especially when it comes to talking about the legacy of injustice and how we can move forward. Land back is a phrase you will hear among and with Indigenous leaders and students, especially, that I've been working with. So, Jim, thanks for sharing that story and shining a light on your work in the local community. So, folks, we are on our way close to the conclusion of the program. We're going to hear a few more voices, though, first. We're going to be hearing from a couple of educators involved with the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series Committee, as well as some students and alums who were student leaders in the program in years past. So to start, I'm sharing one more brief video from our good friend Joe Moore. So bear with me as I get this video queued up from Joe Moore, who works with Tiffin City Schools, and he'll tell us a bit about how we ended up having hundreds, and at this point now thousands, of students from Tiffin involved in the program.
From the outset, I think the organizers at Heidelberg knew that hosting a survivor and a liberator on the same stage was going to be something very special, something they felt they should share. So they reached out to Columbian High School and asked about the possibility of holding a school assembly. School administrators jumped at the idea, and a couple of weeks later, Jimmy and Don shared their stories in the school auditorium with over 700 students. Building on the success of that first year, the following year, the planning committee invited teachers to bring their students to Heidelberg's campus for a presentation specifically designed for junior and senior high school students. Beyond that, mini sessions were added a couple of years later. Sessions that were taught by Heidelberg faculty, dealing with a variety of genocide-related topics, the goal being to help students expand their understanding of different aspects of the Holocaust. Over the years, participation has grown, and now Heidelberg hosts over 600 students every year from area schools, many of whom travel over an hour just to get to Tiffin. I think the opportunity to meet and speak with survivors, liberators, and their family members gives kids a chance to connect faces and voices of real people with the pages in their history book. This year's COVID restrictions have forced the program to take some giant leaps forward. Going virtual has taught us that we don't need to limit our outreach just to schools within driving distance of Tiffin. As we plan for the future, this initiative will be able to reach across Ohio and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you, Joe, for sharing your wisdom and experience with the program. Next, I'd love to welcome Dominic Helmsteader, who's worked with us weekly for a good while now. Dominic, can you come share a little bit about your perspective on the impact of this program on the students that you work with in the school area?
Yeah, thank you very much, Jimmy, or David. I definitely want to thank all of our speakers. each of the families and everybody that's shared their stories. Kim, I had never heard your story in person, and it brought me to tears thinking about the experiences you had, and the value of programs like tonight, the value of listening to these stories, these personal stories that you're hearing tonight, that you've heard the last 10 years. That's the importance. That's the value. It shines a light on what is a really dark topic, and it helps create a spark in kids that, to be honest, a textbook just cannot do. That's why we need to have programs like this, because when you look at the pictures from past years and you see students eagerly listening to each and every story and word and emotion and experience, I'm fortunate where my students were there. They listened, they learned, they were given opportunities afterwards to speak with some of these people face to face and have one-on-one conversations about what they went through, not just during these terrible experiences, but also what they've gone through afterwards to try to deal with this and cope with this. So, as an educator, and I've had the fortune of having 13 years of fun in education here, I love to learn. I have a devotion and enthusiasm for learning, and to share these moments with those kids and connect them with people that is just not a word or a page in a book has been absolutely invaluable. As I keep in touch with my students after they've graduated, they always kind of look back at some of the experiences that we had at Heidelberg University, where my lovely wife would come in, and she works at Heidelberg. My lovely wife would come in and join us on campus, and we would walk through campus. We would talk to professors, we would talk to faculty, and in some cases we would join them in their classes while also listening to these amazing people tell their stories. This is the value. And with the changes that we've experienced over the past calendar year, and kind of being forced to take more of a virtual approach like tonight, it opens doors.
I think we might have lost Dominic, just the point at which a door opened. I think a connectivity door closed for Dominic, unfortunately. Dominic, if you come back, if someone can send me a message when Dominic returns, we might be able to get the last half of his remarks, but we're going to keep the train moving forward. So I'm going to now call upon Miramar Forgani, Alex Hampton, and Victoria Pizarski to join us. Miramar is a student at Heidelberg University, has been working with us and the committee to shape this program this evening and everything that you're going to hear about coming up next. Alex and Victoria are alums of Heidelberg that were in Miram's role previously. So Miram, I'll let you take it away to facilitate a mini panel very briefly here so we can hear some student/alum perspectives. Welcome, Miram.
Thank you, David. Hi, everybody. Again, I'm Miramar Forgani. I am the current representative of Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series. I will be graduating soon, unfortunately, but it has been my absolute pleasure working with this group and this committee. I have learned a lot throughout this committee. I've gained a lot of new concepts of life and information in general. I have expanded my knowledge throughout the 2 years I've been a part of this committee. And yeah, so like I have seen students throughout the events that we do with Lichtman Behm who I know personally that knew nothing about Holocausts or genocides and had the chance to learn and know that we are here to fight against them and advocate to stop them worldwide. So yeah, hi guys, hi Victoria and Alex. So I just wanted to ask you guys to tell me like a little bit about your experience being a part of the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series as a student. Do you guys want to share a little bit about that?
You want to start, Victoria?
Yeah, okay. My name is Victoria. I was
part of it until about 2017 because I graduated in the winter. My freshman year, we had to go to one of the lectures for a class, and it was for the Rwandan Genocide. And I never learned about that stuff in high school outside of the Holocaust. So to know that it happened in Rwanda and other places really surprised me. I was like in awe that we got to speak to a survivor of it because I've never had the chance to do that. And at that one, they had somebody that came and followed this survivor around and basically refuted some of his points he was trying to make. And so for a lot of us, that was surprising. And for my history class, for like the rest of that week and part of the next week, we scrapped all our lesson plans because everyone was so interested in it and seeing like how they could have somebody follow him around and like dispute these when he like survived it and went through it. And then from there, that got me like interested in human rights and just like the whole thing in general. And so I ended up joining the group. And through that, I got to see like how they choose the speakers and how hard it was to start to get speakers, especially for like the Holocaust and other ones, when some other survivors were starting to pass away from older age. And then we were running into the problem of how to change the program to make it more like so people can understand it now but still not miss like the survivor stories, and that kind of gets you to like what we're doing today really. But I mean I just really got interested in the human rights from it. I like when I go on vacations, we've gone to like the Holocaust Museum and like the civil rights museums and stuff like that. It just made a big impact.
Wow. What about you, Alex?
I mean, kind of similar to Victoria, it was required for a class. Obviously, as a big history nerd and a history major, I mean, I was going to go to the lecture series anyways. Didn't have to be required for me. But I mean, same sort of thing. It was kind of what got me into human rights and all of that. It was also what kind of spurred me to look into like the genocide of indigenous people in the United States, and like what led me to write like research on it and be very interested in it. But I mean, I think really what the lecture series offers is like that more hands-on experience. Like you can take a class, you can learn about genocide or ethnic cleansing through books and some primary source like research, but hearing somebody that is actually connected to it as a student really makes it personal, and you can really feel that emotion, which I think ultimately kind of connects you to it in a way that nothing else really can. And it also allows you to go on and like share that experience with others and like kind of keep it in like living memory and not let it fade away so that you do never forget.
Yeah, thank you guys for sharing that. And one last thing. So if you guys would have like one memory or like one sentence that you would guys want to tell the students, or just say to anyone who is thinking of being a part of the Lichtman Behm or just being a human rights activist in general, what would you say throughout your work with Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series?
I'd probably say just like listen to the stories. There's a lot of people with a lot of different stories. If you actually sit there and really listen to them, it really motivates you.
Yeah, I mean, I would say about the same. It's like go listen, try to make sense of it, understand how like these genocides happen, and like actively go out and try to prevent these sorts of things from happening in our world today, which I mean, they still are, but it's important that you go and take all of it in.
I agree. Thank you guys so much for being a part of this and being here today. I agree with both of you with everything you said. I think we should all listen, because listening to the stories are a huge part of knowing and understanding why and when, and literally understanding what is happening. So thank you guys so much. I want to hand it over to David. Thank you.
Awesome.
Thank you.
Thank you so much, everyone. Let me just get this technology here situated. I have these Zoom spotlights turned on, so just give me a moment here so we can get back. I know we have Dominic back. Dominic, do you want to come back on camera and share just another 30 seconds or so of what you were trying to say about that door opening? Right? You left us with an open door. What comes
Yeah,
next?
One of the great things about technology is we get to do fun events like this, but one of the curses of technology is that you can be cut out at an instant's notice. So thank you. I think everybody's kind of said so many amazing things, and I don't want to overshadow the fact that it's these personal stories that we've heard tonight. It's these personal stories that we've heard over the past 10 years. That's what we need to have in our curriculum. That's what we need to have in front of our students, because the best memories that my kids have had in this learning environment have been those memories where they've had a chance to talk to somebody who has survived and somebody who has lived to tell the story that they've been reading about. So it brings new life to the material, and it's something that I absolutely love being part of. I love being engaged with. And yeah, David, I'm going to steal your line here, but together we should remember. And the best part of remembering is to attend events like this, is to seek out the information that is out there, because you don't know how long you're going to have access to some of these things. And it's an extremely, extremely important part of this learning process. So.
Thank you so much, Dominic. Guys, speaking of, what we want to do now is incorporate your voices, your perspectives. This is a chance for us to actually turn remembrance into action a little bit together right now. So what we're about to do is if you don't have a piece of paper, go ahead and grab one, or you could use your phone. And this is a chance for us to reflect on this experience. This is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity to have survivors of different genocides and atrocities, to have so many folks connected to this subject matter, to be uniting the legacy of a decade of this initiative. And what I love to do is I'm going to share my screen once more briefly to show you a bit of what we're about to do. We're all going to write our own Together We Remember pledge. So, or just your own reflection. I've done this activity in schools and universities all around the world, virtually and in person. A few years ago, and in a very powerful way, I did this program, this activity with students at Marjorie Stoneman Douglas High School in Parkland, Florida, after they heard a survivor of the genocide against the Tutsi in Rwanda speak. And it was truly healing and mind-blowing. And so what we wanted to ask you to do is, as a little bit of music plays for about 2 minutes, reflect on any one of these questions. Who do you remember? What do you remember? Why do you remember? Or how do you remember or pledge to turn remembrance into action? You can share the name of a person. You can share the names of multiple people that your family may be connected to that has been impacted by violence of any form. You can share a hope, wish, a dream, an idea. And then we're going to come back together and for a few minutes with the chat, and you'll have a chance to unmute yourself and share briefly, very briefly, please, sort of what your pledge was and what inspired you to write that. And of course, afterwards, you're welcome to share that Together We Remember pledge, Together We Remember ... online. And we have a virtual memorial on our website where all of those posts are crowdsourced, and it lives on forever as a living memorial and an example of our commitment to make progress to a world in which never again is a reality. So again, those questions are: who do you remember? What do you remember? Why do you remember? Or how do you pledge to remember? And now I am going to share some sound and we will be able to reflect. So we'll see each other again in just about 2 minutes. All right, if you're still writing, by all means, please continue to do so. But I would love to welcome folks to start to share. And you can simply come off mute. You could raise your hand using one of those Zoom emojis and I'll call on you. Don't be shy. You heard from survivors and other folks who had the courage to share this evening, some folks who are a little bit afraid to speak. So let's hear. Lori in New York City. Feel free to come off of mute.
Hi, everyone. This is a beautiful, beautiful program. I know we have little time, but I really have to acknowledge all of the moving speakers we heard. The person I want to remember is my father-in-law, Jack Jacobs, who's also a Holocaust survivor. What I remember about him is his smile, which could light up an entire room, and his spirit when he would be dancing with his friends in a wheelchair. He would survive the Holocaust and was shot and paralyzed in 1968 or nine, and came back, lost all his money and came back, and like pure joy. And I remember him. One reason is because it gives me sustenance when I'm down and when I'm feeling overwhelmed, and I think of him and his smile and his philosophy of life, which is whatever you don't want to remember, you don't want to forget, but you want to have a good time, which is also his wife. And we remember, actually, we do work like David does. We have an organization called Memory Project Productions, and we do workshops, and we remember through creating art. His daughter, my wife, is a painter. So our way of is teaching people to make portraits of other victims of genocide or rescuers, and to share those stories. So this is something very close to our hearts, and thank you.
Thank you, Lori. It's so nice to see you.
You too.
Does anyone else care to share? You can raise your actual hand and I'll come to you that way too. Lisa Estrin, go ahead.
I felt like I would get brownie extra points for like writing it down, but I will remember Kim's story. Thank you so much for what you shared tonight. Kim, your family and your courage for reliving the unthinkable in order to share your story with all of us. Thank you so much.
Would anyone else like to share? Tammy, go ahead.
Hi there. So I am thinking of two people. The first one is Don Behm, who I had the pleasure to know, and a dear man. So if you met Don, to know Don was to love Don and the entire Behm family. So I'm thinking of him and one of my former students who came from Rwanda, and how both of them demonstrated humility and gratitude consistently. They were always both very humble about their experiences, and grateful, and the amount of gratitude that they showed. And everyone who knows Don knows that he sang the national anthem. That was what he did to express his gratitude. And Rudy had a ritual like that as well. So I was thinking about how these two people from two very different generations have these common reactions to the experiences that they've been through.
Thank you so much, Tammy. Do we have anyone else who would like to share? Tracy Stark, go ahead. And then Jim.
Hi everyone. I have started a practice in the last few months on Twitter of sharing my condolences on a Twitter page called Faces of COVID that offers of people who have been lost to the pandemic. So my practice and how I am remembering is by going on to that page, and I offer condolences to the family members who share their losses on that page. So that's a how I am remembering.
Thank you so much for sharing, Tracy. Jim, go ahead.
David, nearly 20 years ago, we lost a daughter, a 15-year-old daughter, in an automobile accident. And one of the books that I read after that event was Viktor Frankl's Man's Search for Meaning. And in the book, he had a quote that has stuck with me over the years since then. It says, "Everything can be taken from us but one thing, the last of human freedoms, to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance. Between the stimulus and the response, we have a choice, and in that gap, a decision, bitter or better."
Thank you so much for sharing, Jim. That quote means a lot. Paul, go ahead. And then Leslie. You're on mute, Paul.
we've talked a lot about the oppressed, and we've also been not mentioning as much the oppressor, but all of the above need to be liberated. And we need to break systems of oppression. We need to continue to stop the oppression that is going on. And any of those people can be liberators too. And systems can be stopped even by those who are oppressing. So I think, that's what I keep learning in this. And then last of all, a liberator that was a part of our community is Lindsay Kagey. She was a part of the committee, and she was a driving force for this committee and did a lot of the work behind the scenes to make it happen. But she also had vision and purpose with this, and had a passion for helping people also be liberated from violence or oppression, but also from whatever held them back. And she was a beautiful person. We lost her to cancer a few years ago, and we miss her from our committee.
Oh, thank you so much for sharing that. We definitely miss and will honor the memory of Lindsay through this program. Leslie, over to you.
I remember Heidelberg. I remember Jim and Paul, who provided me an opportunity to reconnect with a family that I had not joined very often because we were off with other family obligations, but I'm not part of that family any longer. So it has been very meaningful for me for them to help out.
Thank you, Leslie. I know many of us here today feel like we have become, you've heard the word family, you've heard love, you heard about my grandpa writing, "I love you." And I know, Rob, you got that note, Lisa, myself, Lauren, who's here, we all got those postcards and they just said, "I love you." And we were like, what is up with this? And my mom, who's with us today, also, I get these cards in the mail. It's just, "I love you." And it's a special thing. And we know that our family here it's beyond just our blood, but it's those who we share these experiences with. So Leslie, thank you. Rob, thank you, everyone. Perhaps one or two more before we have a closing poem, and then time for Q&A, and just, I'll stop the recording, but some of us who haven't seen each other can catch up really quickly before we say goodbye. Michelle, go ahead.
I want to thank everyone for talking. I'm always encouraged, David, when I attend seminars, because I'm remembering my mom, who is still with me, still with us, who is a Kindertransport survivor. And I'm remembering my dad, who fled Vienna at 13 and came to the United States and grew up and partook in the Nuremberg trials. So that is a lot of fate there to contribute to me being here. And I want to develop my story and take it especially to middle school and high school, because I'm a pediatrician, and very comfortable talking to as my way of giving them examples of how to negotiate the difficult life that they have now. And thank you for letting me share.
Thank you, Michelle. And my grandma asked me, but just before this program, she said, "So what's going to happen when we're all gone?" And I said, "Well, what do you think this has all been for? What are we doing tonight, right? What about folks like me and Michelle and my sisters, right? Like, it's been like the training ground for our lives." And at TWR, we often call this, that we say we are living through our Lador Vador moment, which is a Hebrew phrase which means from generation to generation. So at a moment when hate is on the rise, we're losing survivors of the Holocaust, but we are ready for this moment. And what you heard from Michelle is, she's raising her hand and saying, "Let's go." And so, we're ready for this fight. I know, Mom, you're chiming in saying you're remembering all the years of being at Heidelberg and you look forward to being together in person. Amen to that. If anyone else has more to share, by all means, please do so in the chat. What I'd love to do now, before we open it up for just some hanging out and Q&A, is is invite Miram to come back. I'm going to share screen to show a piece of art from a child whose name we don't know, but she or he or they shared this poem, shared this piece of art, or created it while living in the Terezin ghetto, and it's titled "The Butterfly." And Miram is now going to read a poem. I'm sharing screen. Can I get some thumbs up if folks see this?
Yep.
So Miram, over to you for a closing poem.
Awesome. So We Remember Them is a litany of remembrance by Sylvan Kamens and Rabbi Jack Rimmer, and it goes as follows. At the rising of the sun and at its going down, we remember them. At the blowing of the wind and in the chill of winter, we remember them. At the opening of the buds and in the rebirth of spring, we remember them. At the blueness of the skies and in the warmth of summer, we remember them. At the rustling of the leaves and in the beauty of autumn, we remember them. At the beginning of the year and when it ends, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now part of us as we remember them. When we are weary and in need of strength, we remember them. When we are lost and sick in heart, we remember them. When we have joy we craft to share, we remember them. When we have decisions that are difficult to make, we remember them. When we have achievements that are based on theirs, we remember them. As long as we live, they too will live, for they are now a part of us as we remember them. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Miram, for sharing that. At TWR, we really like to focus on how we can incorporate the arts. I know we heard from Lori in New York City as well. Part of our methodology is to unite unlikely allies, but the first thing that we do is we use the arts to open hearts and minds, because we've all got a lot of trauma and stuff that we're carrying, and there's a certain way that art allows us to sort of untangle ourselves a little bit and let us receive new information, new insights, new stories. And we wanted to close with that. So any quick questions or any initial questions before we, well, actually, I'm going to close the recording now, so this part can just be us hanging out together with a little bit of Q&A and folks catching up who haven't seen each other in a long time. So I'm going to go ahead and close the live stream on Facebook. I'll record this part for posterity. So anyone, if you have to drop off, you're more than welcome to. But does anyone have any questions about the work that we're doing? Oh, I should have noted. Big mistake. What's coming up next for Ohio Remembers? Sorry, Paul. I know you have a conclusion to share too. My apologies. Paul, do you want to share something? I was already off track.
You're fine. I feel like we just wanted to briefly talk about where we're going. When we started back in the midst of COVID-19 and in the midst of the pandemic, and we were talking about what we would do with what we'd already postponed, we were talking about maybe doing one event and doing something similar to what we've done in the past, but maybe doing an event online. And that's when the committee gathered, and David had some ideas that pushed us to go a little further, and then it became much more to really begin to share the recordings of what we've done in the past, and we're working on that. And well, David's going to share more about all those things, but we created out of that Ohio Remembers, and it's a joint initiative of Heidelberg University and Together We Remember to empower students, educators, and community leaders across the Buckeye State to be effective human rights advocates and stewards of collective memory. So through an interactive virtual programming offered from January, which we started this year, to May, participants will gain the knowledge, skills, and relationships they need to foster social resilience in a time of acute social conflict. They will learn to apply the lessons of the past to the present to counter anti-Semitism, racism, xenophobia, and other forms of violent hatred in their schools, communities, and on social media. Together, we will remember humanity at its worst and demonstrate what Ohioans can be at their best, so that never again may become a reality once and for all. David will share a few of the upcoming events and what we've done this spring.
Thank you, Paul. Sorry I jumped the gun there. So as you shared, we are now turning the Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series into a much bigger initiative, and we have dreams of spreading this work across the state of Ohio. And I just heard today from our good friends and members of the TWR Coalition, the Holocaust Center for Humanity in Cincinnati. And so we have a lot of potential to take this model where we're engaging at universities in areas that don't have Holocaust and human rights centers, and we can turn these spaces into pop-up human rights centers, essentially, or perhaps have raised the resources to build human rights centers in your space. But moving forward, for now, in this virtual environment, we're doing a couple of different things. We have virtual events like this. On January 27th, we had had several speakers. Noemi Lopian was here in the chat if you saw her comments. Noemi and Derek Neiman. So that was the daughter of a Holocaust survivor and the grandson of an SS officer who shared their story and how they speak to open hearts and minds around the world. And that was their first talk in the United States, happened with the Heidelberg community, which is really special and we're proud of. We have this program, and then coming up on March 23rd, we have our official Lichtman Behm Genocide Lecture Series, in which we will be, for the first time, featuring the story of the Armenian Genocide, and as well as ongoing issues that are facing the Armenian community, including ongoing denial of the genocide by Turkey. And it's been very important to talk about this as well because of ongoing conflict in land where many Armenians live in the Near East. So, and then beyond that, Miram is working with her peers to host another a virtual and perhaps partially in person Together Remember Vigil on April 4th and April 5th, right, Miram? And then all throughout April, which is Genocide Awareness Month, our coalition members around the world will be sharing virtual events all 30 days of the month, and it will culminate on April 29th with a 24-hour virtual global vigil that will go from perhaps Hong Kong all the way through South Africa and end here in the United States, where we get to show how people all over the world are standing united, committed to turning remembrance into action to make never again a reality. So whether you're a student or an educator or a community leader, we will have resources, tools, and opportunities to get involved. You can learn how to host a virtual vigil in your classroom, and we'll be hosting professional development opportunities as well. So that's what we have coming up. And then after that, we'll figure out where the rest of this Ohio Remembers initiative goes. But first, we got to get through May. We got to end this pandemic. I got to have my actual wedding in August if it happens. It's been 3 times we've rescheduled this thing, but all throughout it, we're going to persevere. So thank you, Paul, for all of your commitment to this program, to Rob, to everyone, Jim, everyone in the Heidelberg family, Leslie. This has truly been an amazing experience. So
David, I just want to say hello to Martha. Martha, this is Susan, Rob's wife. I just want to say hello to you and thank you so much for your wonderful words tonight.
Dad, can you unmute Mama? There we go.
Everybody from Heidelberg.
Mama, so what did you think of the program tonight?
I think it was wonderful. You did a great job, and everybody. And I want to thank Mr. Huntington and Jim and Paul, everybody, their kind words to me, and remember Papa, Jimmy. I really appreciate it very much. Thank you for everybody. For Heidelberg.
Thank you, Mama.
It's in my heart, and hopefully that I'll be around yet and I'll be able to say a few words again. It's not that good, but all right. So
you better stick around.
Yeah. So thank you for everybody, everything. Have a nice evening, David, and thank you for you to help me out. I appreciate it as always.
Of course, I got you. You've helped me out. Just keep sending me that Hungarian pogacha, which are these like butter cookies. As long as you keep feeding me butter cookies, we're good. We're good. Only got a few left. Anyone else want to share just anything? This is our family time, so to speak.
Appreciate for the kind words.
What just what a blessing all of you have been, you know, and to think of the Lichtman family and the Behm family, how you all have just brought so much to our community and changed our lives, changed my life and, you know, our community to focus on this and to keep remembering and to see students who are inspired and working in their lives differently, to see us doing things differently than we ever thought we'd do them, and continuing to change and to bring the Ohio together, and now people from all over the world together to talk about this and to work at how we can really change things one by one. Thank you.
Indeed. Anyone else have a closing thought? Otherwise, I'm gonna sign off here and cook dinner.
I'm going to warm up some lentil soup.
Awesome. Well, everyone, thank you so much for such an incredible experience. This will never happen like this again, I hope, because we won't need to do it this way. Hopefully we'll be in person, but maybe have a virtual audience, you know, beaming in a different way. But this truly is a unique moment in history, and it's documented for posterity that we were here, we did this, and I'm very excited that this is on record, because maybe after the next 10 years, we'll look back and think about how far we've come and share some clips from this event and this program, which would be super cool. So sending my best and our best on behalf of my family to all of you. And we look forward to teaming up on the next program on March 23rd and everything else to come. Be well, be safe, get vaccinated.
Thank you, David. Thank you, David. Your grandfather would be very proud of you. Thank you. Following in his beautiful, beautiful heart. Thank you. Good night.
Thank you all. Good night.
Thank you.
Bye.